Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going way beyond the headlines to get to know a figure who was a major player in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict until just recently. Yahya Sinwar.
Yeah,
We've pulled out all the key info from his Wikipedia entry.
right.
And I gotta say, his life story, it reads like a total political thriller.
It really does. Yahya Sinwar's journey is so intertwined with the Palestinian experience that it's
Yeah, it's impossible to separate the two.
almost impossible to separate the two.
Exactly, and that's why this deep dive is so crucial.
Right.
Whether you follow the news really closely or you just want to get a handle on how complex this conflict really is, understanding Sinwar is key. So strap in, because we're starting in the Khan Yunis refugee camp where he was born.
And it's so important to remember this was a direct result of the 1948 Palestinian exodus, what's known as the Nakba.
Right.
Think about the impact of that entire families forced from their homes.
Yeah.
That kind of collective trauma it reverberates through generations.
Absolutely. For Sinwar growing up in that environment, surrounded by the consequences of displacement, it must have totally shaped his worldview.
Oh, for sure.
But here's the thing. Even in those circumstances, which were incredibly difficult, he excelled in school. But he even became student council president.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Those early leadership qualities were already there, but then in 1985, Sinwar establishes Majd Hamas's Internal Security and Counterintelligence Unit. Talk about a turning point.
Okay, wait, hold on. I need some context here.
Yeah.
Why was counterintelligence oh so vital for Hamas at that time?
Well, think about it. Hamas was this young, emerging organization
Right.
facing constant threats from Israeli intelligence agencies, infiltration collaborators. These were real dangers. Sinwar recognized that to survive, they had to be one step ahead.
So Majid was all about protecting the movement from within.
Exactly. Rooting out spies, identifying potential threats, that was their mission. And Sinwar was, obsessed with security. There's actually a quote from him where he says, "Breaking the Israeli occupation requires eliminating all its tools." And he considered collaborators to be one of those tools.
That's intense. But that commitment to security, that almost ruthless approach, eventually lands him in prison.
Yeah.
And not just for a short stint. We're talking multiple arrests and eventually a sentence of 4 life terms plus 25 years.
That's right. Israel clearly saw him as a major threat. They went to extraordinary lengths to try to neutralize him.
Right.
But here's where it gets really interesting. While in prison, Sinwar dedicated himself to studying Israeli society and culture. He even became fluent in Hebrew.
Hold on, wait. This seems to contradict everything we know about him so far.
Why would he do that?
It's a brilliant strategy. Unsettling but brilliant. He wasn't content with just opposing Israel. He wanted to understand them, their psychology, their vulnerabilities, their tactics.
Yeah.
It was all part of his larger game. He even reportedly spent time meticulously analyzing Hebrew newspapers in prison.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. It's like he was trying to get inside their heads to anticipate their every move.
Yeah.
And then in 2011 comes a prisoner exchange that changes everything. Over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, including Sinwar, are released in exchange for the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit.
This was a monumental moment. Imagine emerging from decades of imprisonment, hardened by the experience, and with an even deeper understanding of your adversary.
Right.
That's the Sinwar who re-enters the world, and he quickly ascends within Hamas.
Yeah, he has their military wing, and then in 2017 becomes the head of Hamas in Gaza.
Yeah.
So he's now in a position of real power. What's his game plan?
His focus becomes threefold: solidifying Hamas control in Gaza, developing their military capabilities, and maintaining an uncompromising stance against Israel. He was, by all accounts, a hardliner.
But then in 2018, he makes his baffling statement about embracing peaceful popular resistance.
Yeah.
What's the real story here? Was this a genuine shift or just a PR move?
That's a question that puzzled a lot of people. Peaceful popular resistance, in the context of Hamas, refers to a strategy that emphasizes mass demonstrations, civil disobedience, and international pressure.
So not giving up armed resistance entirely, but adding another layer to their tactics?
Exactly. Whether this was a genuine change of heart, a calculated move to gain international support, or perhaps even a reflection of internal divisions within Hamas, we may never know for sure. But one thing's for sure, it didn't deter Israel from taking drastic action.
You're talking about the 2021 bombing of Sinwar's house during the Gaza conflict.
Yeah.
That felt like a major escalation.
Absolutely. It was a symbolic attack, a clear message from Israel. But what's astonishing is that Sinwar survives and then does something incredibly audacious. He appears in public directly challenging Israel to assassinate him.
He practically dared them to try again. What impact did that have?
It was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. It made him seem fearless, a true leader in the eyes of his supporters, while simultaneously making Israel look powerless, and it definitely solidified his hardline image.
So from refugee camp to hardened militant leader, it's been quite a journey so far, and it's not over yet. Stay with us as we delve into the most turbulent chapter of Yahya Sinwar's life.
It is a turbulent chapter.
For a quick break.
Very turbulent. And turbulent is an understatement. Because in October of 2023, Hamas launches Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, and the conflict explodes.
This was a huge turning point. Hamas fighters infiltrating Israel, taking hostages, launching rockets. The world was in shock as Israel responded with a full-scale military operation in Gaza. The casualties on both sides were devastating.
And in the middle of all the chaos, 3 weeks into the conflict, Sinwar proposes a prisoner swap.
Wow.
He says he'll release all the hostages in exchange for all Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails.
Talk about a power play. It was a high-stakes gamble, putting a ton of pressure on Israel. Doesn't even consider it.
Initially, Israel rejected the offer completely. But as the conflict dragged on and with mounting international pressure, they eventually agreed to a partial swap.
So some hostages were released, some Palestinian prisoners were freed, and there was a brief ceasefire. But it was short-lived, right?
Tragically, yes. The fighting resumed, and the situation in Gaza deteriorated even further. The death toll kept rising. The humanitarian crisis deepened. It was a truly bleak time.
And through it all, Sinwar remained a central figure. Israel blamed him for orchestrating the whole operation and was determined to find him.
They believed he was hiding somewhere in Khan Yunis, but despite their intelligence network and military might, they couldn't locate him. He was like a phantom, a ghost, leading the resistance from the shadows.
It's almost hard to believe. This incredibly powerful figure, seemingly untouchable even though he was in the crosshairs of one of the world's most formidable militaries. And then just a few weeks ago, on October 16th, 2024, everything changed.
That's when reports came in of a targeted Israeli military operation in Gaza.
Right.
At first, the details were scarce shrouded in secrecy, but then the news broke.
Israel confirmed they believe Yahya Sinwar was dead, killed in the operation. It sent shockwaves through the region. It's hard to overstate how significant this is. Sinwar had become this symbol of Palestinian resistance, a figure who evoked both intense admiration and fierce condemnation.
His death marked the end of an era. It was a seismic event with potentially far-reaching consequences for Hamas, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the whole region.
So where do we go from here? What does this mean for the future of Hamas, for the possibility of peace?
Well, those are the questions everyone's asking right now. Some believe Sinwar's death could create a power vacuum within Hamas, potentially leading to internal struggles or even fragmentation.
So a weakening of the organization from within.
That's definitely one possibility. Others argue that his death will be used as a rallying cry, a symbol of martyrdom that will inspire a new generation of militants, making the conflict even more intractable.
It's hard to imagine this not making an already complex situation even more challenging.
And then there's the question of the impact on the Palestinian people. Sinwar, despite his controversial tactics, was seen by many as a symbol of defiance, a leader who stood up to Israel. His death could galvanize them, fueling further resistance. Or it could leave them feeling even more disillusioned and hopeless, further complicating the path to peace.
It's a lot to unpack, and we haven't even touched on the international implications. What will Sinwar's death mean for the delicate balance of power in the region? Will it spark further instability, or could it potentially create an opportunity for renewed international efforts to find a lasting solution?
These are questions we'll be exploring in the final part of our deep dive. Join us after a short break as we delve into Sinwar's complex legacy and what his death might mean for the future.
So we've traced Yahya Sinwar's journey from that refugee camp to the leadership of Hamas. And now we're left with this question mark hanging over everything. What happens now?
It's the question on everyone's mind.
What?
What does Sinwar's death mean for Hamas, for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, for the future of the region? No easy answers. But let's try to unpack some of the possibilities.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that some analysts believe Sinwar's death could create this power vacuum within Hamas. Could you talk a little more about that?
Sure. So Hamas is a complex organization, right, with different factions and competing interests.
Right.
Sinwar was this powerful, unifying figure. His absence could lead to internal power struggles, maybe even fracturing the movement.
So one scenario is that Hamas is weakened internally, potentially becoming less effective as a cohesive force.
Exactly. But there's a flip side to this. Sinwar's death could also be a catalyst for increased radicalization within Hamas.
Okay.
He could become a martyr. His image used to inspire a new wave of militants even more committed to armed struggle.
It's almost like his death could have the opposite effect, strengthening Hamas's resolve making them more determined to resist.
Precisely. It's hard to predict which way it will go.
Yeah.
And then there's the question of the Palestinian people themselves. Sinwar, despite his controversial methods, was seen by many as a symbol of defiance. A leader who, in their eyes, stood up to Israel. His death could be a source of immense anger and frustration, further fueling the conflict.
So Sinwar's legacy is far from simple. He leaves behind a complex and potentially volatile situation.
Definitely.
And when we kind of zoom out to the bigger picture, the international implications are huge.
Absolutely. Sinwar's death is going to send ripples through the region. It could make negotiations even more difficult, further entrenching the existing divides. On the other hand, maybe this could create a window of opportunity.
A chance for a reset.
Possibly. Maybe new leadership within Hamas will be more open to dialogue. Or maybe this will be a wake-up call for the international community to re-engage, to push for a more active role in finding a peaceful resolution.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's kind of overwhelming to think about all the potential consequences. What should we be watching for in the coming weeks and months? What are the key indicators that might tell us which direction things are heading?
I think it's crucial to pay attention to who emerges as the new leader of Hamas in Gaza. Their background, their ideology, their approach to the conflict. These will be telling signs.
Yeah.
We also need to watch how the Palestinian people react, whether there's a surge in protests or a shift in public opinion. And of course, the actions of the Israeli government will be crucial. Will they seize this moment to pursue a different path, or will they double down on their existing policies?
So much is still uncertain. We've gone through Yahya Sinwar's life, from his childhood in a refugee camp to his rise as this powerful leader, and now we're left with this sense of anticipation, this question of what his death will ultimately mean for the future.
It's a reminder that history is constantly unfolding, and even the most influential figures can't control how their story ends. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is deeply rooted, a multifaceted issue. It's a story of trauma resistance and the ongoing search for a just and lasting peace. Sinwar's life was a part of that story, and his death will undoubtedly shape the chapters to come.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. Thanks for taking us through this complex and honestly often tragic history.
My pleasure. And thanks to our listeners for joining us on this journey. You know, it's through understanding these individual stories that we can start to grasp the larger narrative of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's a story that demands our attention, our empathy, and our unwavering hope for a better future.